The First World War of 1914 to 1918 was one of the deadliest events in African history before the devastation of World War II. But it wasn't a war Africans started or wanted to fight. Instead, it happened because European countries had recently taken over most of Africa, divided it among themselves, and used African people and resources to serve their own interests. Firstly, French and British colonial armies, mostly made up of African soldiers and laborers, invaded German-controlled areas like Togoland, now Togo, and Cameroon, now Cameroon. Later, in 1916, British soldiers from West Africa were sent to East Africa, places like Tanzania, Burundi, and Rwanda, to fight against German forces. Secondly, France sent a large number of African soldiers to Europe to fight on the front lines. This policy, which started after France suffered heavy losses in 1915, was very unpopular in West Africa and led to protests and uprisings. These African soldiers, called shock troops, fought bravely in Europe, but many returned home with little reward for their sacrifices. Some believed their experience might inspire equality with Europeans in the future, but most went back to their old lives with no major changes. The human cost of the war was immense. Many African soldiers, workers, and civilians lost their lives or suffered greatly during the war. After the war, the changes in African colonies were small compared to the amount of suffering people endured. The new borders in Africa that came after the war might have happened even without the fighting. Although European governments largely forgot about African contributions after the war, the memories of African veterans remain alive, especially among their descendants. These stories are often used to push for greater acceptance of Africans in European countries, especially in France. Sadly, racist stereotypes from colonial times still exist today, making it harder for African communities to gain full acceptance in these societies.